At 10:10 hours on the morning of April 8, 1940, Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope gave an order that defied every principle of naval warfare, every calculation of survival, every instinct toward self-preservation. Stand by to ram. HMS Glowworm, 1,345 tons, already burning, already dying. Her forward gun destroyed. Her bridge riddled with shell fragments. Her speed reduced to bare steerage way. Turned directly toward the German heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, 14,000 tons, 8 8-inch guns, armor belt 70 to 80 millimeters thick, a ship 10 times Glowworm's displacement with guns that could pulverize a destroyer at ranges the destroyer's weapons could not reach. The mathematics were impossible, the outcome predetermined. Roope ordered the ram anyway. HMS Glowworm tore into Admiral Hipper's starboard side, amidships, gouging open 130 feet of armored plating, destroying the forward-starboard torpedo mounting, puncturing 2 freshwater tanks, killing 1 German sailor at his gun as the destroyer pulled clear. Her sole remaining gun, commanded by Petty Officer Walter Scott, fired 1 final salvo. The round struck at 400 yards range. Then Glowworm capsized and sank. This should not have happened. A destroyer does not challenge a heavy cruiser. A damaged ship does not ram an undamaged opponent. A commander does not sacrifice his vessel and crew in a gesture that cannot alter the strategic situation. The tactical handbooks, the training manuals, the accumulated wisdom of centuries of naval warfare all dictated withdrawal, evasion, survival if possible. Roope chose ram instead. The reasons why illuminate the nature of courage, the mathematics of desperation, and the gap between what doctrine prescribed and what honor demanded. On April 6, 1940, HMS Glowworm was screening the battlecruiser HMS Renown during Operation Wilfred. The British plan to lay defensive minefields in Norwegian coastal waters. The operation aimed to force German shipping into international waters where British forces could intercept it. The strategic objective was preventing Swedish iron ore from reaching Germany via Norwegian ports. The weather was appalling. Heavy seas, strong winds, visibility intermittent. At approximately 1400 hours, able seaman Geoffrey Harold Hanford was swept overboard. Lieutenant Commander Roope immediately requested permission from Renown to conduct search operations. Permission granted. Glowworm detached from the formation and began searching. For 24 hours, Glowworm searched. The seas were too rough, the visibility too poor. Hanford was not found. He would not be found. At dawn on April 8th, Glowworm abandoned the search and turned to rejoin Renown. The destroyer was alone, 60 miles from her formation, proceeding through waters that might contain German forces. They did contain German forces. At approximately 0750 hours, lookouts on Glowworm spotted a vessel through heavy weather. The contact initially identified itself as Swedish when challenged. Then it opened fire. The ship was the German destroyer Z-11 Bernd von Arnim, part of Group 2 of Operation Weserübung, the German invasion of Norway. Group 2 comprised the heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper and 4 destroyers, S5 Paul Jacobi, 6 Theodor Riedel, Z8 Bruno Heinemann, and Z11 Bernd von Arnim. The ships carried 1,700 Wehrmacht mountain troops to seize Trondheim. Glowworm returned fire. She scored at least 1 hit on Bernd von Arnim. The German destroyer and her consort, Z18 Hans Ludemann, which had also appeared, immediately turned north and fled into a rain squall. They were radioing for help. Lieutenant Commander Roope understood the tactical situation instantly. The German destroyers were drawing him toward something larger. Standard doctrine dictated breaking contact, reporting enemy position, evading. Roope chose pursuit instead. His reasoning was clear and correct. A German force heading for Norway in these waters meant invasion. British forces needed to know composition, strength, direction. Glowworm had encountered the enemy by accident. She would exploit that accident to gather intelligence even if it cost her. At approximately 0950 hours, through the heavy seas and intermittent visibility, Glowworm's lookouts sighted a much larger vessel approaching at high speed. Admiral Hipper. Roope immediately transmitted an enemy report giving position. Ship type, course. The signal reached Renown. Then Roope turned to engage. The specifications told the story before the battle began. HMS Glowworm was a G-class destroyer ordered under the 1933 construction program, built by John Farquhar Thornycroft and Company at Woolston, Hampshire. Laid down August 15th, 1934. Launched July 22nd, 1935. Completed January 22nd, 1936 at a cost of £248,785 excluding government-furnished equipment and armament. She measured 323 feet length overall, 33 feet beam, 12 feet 6 inches draft. Displacement 1,370 tons standard, 1,913 tons full load. Parsons geared steam turbines driving 2 shafts developed 34,000 shaft horsepower, providing a maximum speed of 36 knots. Range at 15 knots was 5,530 nautical miles. Her machinery consisted of 3 Admiralty 3-drum boilers feeding the turbines. Armament comprised 4 4.7-inch Mark 9 guns in single mounts, 2 forward and 2 aft, 2 quadruple .5-inch Vickers machine guns for anti-aircraft defense, 10 21-inch torpedo tubes in 2 quintuple mountings, depth charge rails and throwers. Her armor was minimal, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than protection. A destroyer's defense was not absorbing hits but avoiding them. Complement was 137 officers and men in peacetime, increasing to 146 during wartime. On April 8, 1940, Glowworm carried 149 crew. The extra men were survivors from other ships and additional specialists. Admiral Hipper was something else entirely. Lead ship of her class, laid down July 6, 1935 at Blohm & Voss in Hamburg. Launched February 6, 1937. Commissioned April 29, 1939. She was named after Admiral Franz von Hipper, commander of German battlecruiser squadron at Jutland and later commander-in-chief of the High Seas Fleet. Official displacement was listed as 14,240 tons standard to comply with treaty limitations. Actual displacement was 16,260 tons standard, 18,200 tons full load. This discrepancy was typical of German treaty violations. The Kriegsmarine routinely exceeded treaty limits while reporting compliant figures. Hipper measured 205 meters length overall, 21.3 meters beam, 7.2 meters draft maximum, 3-shaft arrangement with 3 Blohm & Voss, geared steam turbines developing 132,000 shaft horsepower, maximum speed 32 knots. Range at 19 knots was 6,800 nautical miles. Main armament consisted of 8 20.3cm SKC, 34 guns in 4 twin turrets, 2 forward and 2 aft. Secondary armament comprised 12 10.5cm SK, C-33 dual-purpose guns in 6 twin mounts. Light anti-aircraft battery included 12 3.7cm SK, C-30 guns and 8 2cm guns, 12 53.3cm torpedo tubes in 4 triple mounts. Aircraft facilities included hangar space for 2 or 3 Aradoar, 1 96 floatplanes, and 1 catapult. Armor belt was 70 to 80 millimeters thick. Upper deck, 12 to 30 millimeters. Main armored deck, 20 to 50 millimeters. Turret faces 105 millimeters. Conning tower, 150 millimeters on vertical surfaces. Complement was approximately 1,600 personnel. The comparison was not a comparison. It was a mismatch. Hipper outweighed Glowworm by a factor of 10. Her main guns fired 122-kilogram shells to 33,500 meters maximum range. Glowworm's 4.7-inch guns fired 22.7-kilogram shells to 15,900 meters. Hipper's armor could shrug off destroyer-caliber shells at anything but point-blank range. Glowworm had no armor to speak of. A single 8-inch shell striking anywhere vital would cripple or sink her. At approximately 09:58 hours, Admiral Hipper opened fire at 8,400 meters range. Initially, Kapitän zur See Helmuth Heer had difficulty distinguishing Glowworm from Baron von Arnim in the poor visibility and heavy seas. Once identification was positive, Hipper's forward turrets engaged. The 4th salvo struck. Shell fragments riddled Glowworm's bridge, radio room, and forward gun. The hit destroyed navigation equipment and wounded several men. Roope immediately made smoke and turned into his own smoke screen, attempting to break visual contact. Hipper possessed radar-directed fire control. The smoke did not matter. German fire continued with precision. When Glowworm emerged from the smoke, the range had closed enough for Hipper's 10.5-centimeter secondary battery to engage. These guns were designed for anti-aircraft work, but served equally well against surface targets at close range. Hits accumulated. Glowworm's mast was struck and fell, the falling mast causing a short circuit that activated the ship's siren. The wailing continued throughout the battle. Engine room was hit. Captain's day cabin destroyed. Forward gun mount disabled. Bridge repeatedly struck by shell fragments. Steering gear damaged, forcing the crew to steer manually from aft using emergency steering. At 10:10 hours, Lieutenant Commander Roope fired 5 torpedoes from one mounting at 800 meters range. All missed. Hay had kept Hipper bow on to Glowworm specifically to minimize torpedo threat. The cruiser's narrow profile heading directly at the destroyer made torpedo hits extremely unlikely. Glowworm fell back through her own smokescreen, attempting to buy time to bring her second torpedo mounting into action. Hay followed. He intended to finish the destroyer before she could fire her remaining torpedoes. The tactical situation was clear. Glowworm was crippled, burning, barely making way. Hipper was undamaged and possessed overwhelming firepower superiority. This would not take long. Roope fired the remaining 5 torpedoes. All missed. Glowworm had exhausted her primary armament. 10 torpedoes fired, 0 hits. Her forward gun was destroyed. Her remaining guns could barely penetrate Hipper's armor, even at point-blank range. Her speed was reduced, her steering damaged, her structure compromised by multiple hits. Fire burned in several compartments. Casualties mounted. The outcome was predetermined. Standard procedure dictated surrender or abandonment. The destroyer had fulfilled her mission. She had reported enemy position and composition. She had engaged superior forces and been defeated. Nothing remained to accomplish. Continuing the fight served no purpose except accumulating casualties. Lieutenant Commander Roope gave the order to close and ram. Gerard Broadmead Roope was 35 years old, born March 13, 1905 at Hillbrook, Trull, near Taunton in Somerset. Son of Gerard Roope, described as a gentleman of independent means, and Florence, daughter of Thomas Palfrey Broadmead, Justice of the Peace of Enmore Castle, Somerset. The Broadmead family had owned Enmore Castle since the 1830s, part of the landed gentry. Roope joined the Royal Navy as a cadet in 1918 at age 13, entering the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth. Appointed midshipman, January 15, 1923 aboard HMS Revenge. Promoted lieutenant September 30, 1927. Promoted lieutenant commander September 30, 1935. Appointed first commanding officer of HMS Glowworm, July 22, 1938, when the ship commissioned. His service record was unremarkable in the positive sense. Competent, professional, reliable, no disciplinary issues, no notable achievements, no black marks. The sort of officer who does his duty efficiently without attracting attention. He was married to Faith Dulcibella Clark. They had 2 children, Michael Gerard Broadmead, born 1929, and Felicity Faith, born 1933. Nothing in Roope's background suggested what he would do on April 8, 1940. He was not a risk-taker, not reckless, not given to dramatic gestures. He was a professional naval officer executing orders and following doctrine, until the moment he ordered his ship to ram a cruiser 10 times her size. The ramming of Admiral Hipper by HMS Glowworm at 10:10 hours was not an act of desperation born from panic. It was a calculated tactical decision based on sound reasoning. Glowworm could not escape. Her speed was too reduced. Hipper was faster even undamaged. The heavy seas prevented effective maneuvering. The visibility aided the radar-equipped German ship more than the destroyer relying on optical rangefinders. Glowworm could not effectively engage. Her torpedoes were expended. Her main guns could not penetrate Hipper's armor at any range she could achieve before being sunk. Secondary weapons were irrelevant against a heavy cruiser. Glowworm could not surrender in a manner that would save her crew. Stopping dead in heavy seas meant being pounded to pieces by Hipper's guns before any surrender could be negotiated. Even if Hipper ceased fire, transferring crew in those seas was probably impossible. Most would drown. Ramming offered the only possibility of inflicting damage on the enemy. A destroyer's bow could penetrate a cruiser's side armor if delivered with sufficient force. The damage might be significant enough to compromise Hipper's ability to continue operations. At minimum, it would delay the German force and alert British forces to their position and composition. The order made tactical sense in a situation where no good options existed. It was the choice that gave British interests the best outcome from Glowworm's imminent destruction. Roope turned hard to starboard. Glowworm's engines, still functioning despite damage, brought her speed up to perhaps 10 or 12 knots. The destroyer's siren wailed continuously from the short-circuited wiring. Every remaining gun fired. The bridge transmitted no orders because the bridge communications were destroyed. Gun crews fired on their own initiative at a target impossible to miss. Capitaine Hipper saw the maneuver too late. He attempted to turn Hipper to ram Glowworm first, bringing the cruiser's armored bow to bear. The cruiser was too slow to turn, too large, too ponderous compared to the destroyer. HMS Glowworm struck Admiral Hipper's starboard side amidships at approximately 10:10 hours. The impact tore away 130 feet of armored plating. The destroyer's bow crumpled and scraped along the cruiser's side. Hipper's forward starboard torpedo mounting was destroyed. All 3 tubes wrenched from their mountings and left hanging useless. 2 freshwater tanks were punctured. 1 German sailor manning an anti-aircraft gun was killed by the impact. As Glowworm pulled clear, Petty Officer Walter Scott, commanding the only gun still capable of firing, loosed 1 final salvo. The round struck Hipper at 400 yards range. Then, Glowworm heeled over to starboard, already listing heavily, water pouring into her forward compartments through the massive damage where her bow had been. Lieutenant Commander Roope gave the order to abandon ship. The crew began going over the side into heavy seas. Water temperature in early April in these waters was approximately 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Survival time in such water without immersion suit was measured in minutes. Most of the crew wore standard uniforms, not cold water gear. Life jackets provided flotation but not thermal protection. Glowworm capsized shortly after 10:10 hours and sank. The ship went down in position 64 degrees 13 minutes north, 6 degrees 28 minutes east, approximately 120 miles west of Trondheim. Captain Gerard immediately ordered Admiral Hipper to heave to and begin rescue operations. German sailors threw lines, launched boats where possible in the heavy seas, pulled British sailors from the water. The rescue effort continued for over an hour despite the tactical situation. High knew British forces had been alerted by Glowworm's transmission. Renown and other British ships might be converging on this position. High's mission was landing troops at Trondheim, not rescuing enemy sailors. He conducted the rescue anyway. 40 survivors were pulled from the water. 1 officer, Lieutenant Robert Archibald Ramsey, torpedo control officer and the only officer to survive. 39 ratings. Of Glowworm's complement of 149, 109 men died, 73% casualties. Lieutenant Commander Roope was not among the survivors. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Roope in the water helping other sailors don life jackets. German sailors threw him a rope. He grasped it but could not maintain his grip. The cold water had sapped his strength. He slipped beneath the waves and drowned. His body was not recovered. The survivors were brought aboard Admiral Hipper. They received immediate medical attention, warm clothing, food, dry quarters, treatment as military prisoners under established conventions. German officers and crew congratulated them on a valiant fight. Captain Hipper personally spoke with survivors, commending their courage and their captain's skill. When High learned the identity of Glowworm's commander, he made a decision as unusual as Roope's decision to ram. Haya composed a letter to the British Admiralty via the International Red Cross. In the letter, he recommended Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope for the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest award for valor. High cited Roope's courage in engaging a vastly superior warship, his skill in ship handling under impossible conditions, and his determination to fight to the end despite overwhelming odds. This was unprecedented. Enemy commanders did not recommend opposing officers for valor awards. The practice simply did not exist in modern warfare. Hay did it anyway. Admiral Hipper proceeded to Trondheim with reduced fuel reserves and significant structural damage. The ramming had done more than cosmetic harm. The punctured freshwater tanks forced water rationing. The destroyed torpedo mounting reduced offensive capability. The hull breach required immediate repair before the ship could operate effectively. Most critically, the collision delayed Hipper's arrival at Trondheim by hours and forced an extended port stay for repairs that could have been avoided. The German invasion of Norway succeeded despite Glowworm's action. British forces, alerted by Roope's transmission, were too distant to intercept Group 2 before the landings at Trondheim. Renown and escorts arrived in the area hours after Hipper had already delivered her troops and departed for repairs. Operation Weserübung achieved its objectives across Norway. British and French forces that landed to oppose the invasion were eventually withdrawn. The strategic impact of HMS Glowworm's final action was negligible. Norway fell to German occupation. The iron ore shipments continued. British plans to interdict German supply lines failed. One destroyer's sacrifice could not alter that outcome. The tactical impact was modest. Admiral Hipper required 2 weeks of repairs. She missed the subsequent operation to seize Harstad in early June. The damage was significant enough that German Naval Command reassessed the vulnerability of heavy surface units to close-range destroyer attacks. Doctrine was revised to emphasize destroying destroyers at maximum range before they could close to ramming distance. The human impact was total. 109 British sailors died. 40 became prisoners of war for the duration. Families received telegrams. Widows received pensions. Children grew up without fathers. The cost was paid by individuals who had no say in strategic decisions or operational planning. The moral impact was immeasurable. Word of Glowworm's action spread through the Royal Navy despite official secrecy about the engagement. A destroyer had rammed a cruiser. A commander had fought to the end against impossible odds. The enemy himself had acknowledged British courage. In spring 1940, as British forces evacuated from Norway and Denmark fell and France braced for invasion, such examples mattered. Information about the engagement remained classified throughout the war. Lieutenant Ramsay and the other survivors spent 5 years as prisoners of war. They could not report what had happened. German records remained in German hands. British authorities knew Glowworm had engaged enemy forces and been sunk. They did not know the details. In 1945, after Germany's surrender, Ramsay and the survivors returned to Britain. They provided complete accounts of the action. Ramsay's report detailed the engagement minute by minute. Other survivors corroborated. The German account, including High's letter recommending the Victoria Cross, became available through captured records and Red Cross archives. On July 6, 1945, the London Gazette published the citation awarding the Victoria Cross posthumously to Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope. The citation read, in part, "The Victoria Cross is bestowed in recognition of the great valor of the commanding officer who, after fighting off a superior force of destroyers, sought out and reported a powerful enemy unit, and then fought his ship to the end against overwhelming odds, finally ramming the enemy with supreme coolness and skill." The award was presented to Roope's widow Faith on February 12, 1946 by King George VI. It was the first Victoria Cross awarded for action in the Second World War, though not the first gazetted. The timing reflected the difficulty of confirming details while survivors remained prisoners and German records were inaccessible. Lieutenant Robert Ramsay received the Distinguished Service Order. Engine Room Artificer Henry Gregg received the Conspicuous Gallantry Medal. Petty Officer Walter Scott received the Conspicuous Gallantry Medal. Able Seaman Reginald Merritt received the Conspicuous Gallantry Medal. The Victoria Cross Roope earned remains in private ownership, held by his descendants. It is not on public display. A plaque honoring Roope and Glowworm's crew is displayed at the Royal Naval and Royal Albert Yacht Club in Portsmouth. His name appears on the Portsmouth Naval Memorial, commemorating Royal Navy personnel lost at sea with no known grave. Kapitän zur See Helmuth High survived the war. He received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross on January 18, 1941 for his actions during the Norwegian Campaign, specifically for successfully navigating the fortified Trondheim Fjord and landing invasion troops despite defensive obstacles. He was promoted to Vice Admiral and commanded various forces through 1945. After the war, he published works on naval strategy and history. He joined the Christian Democratic Union and served in the Bundestag from 1953 to 1961. He was elected Parliamentary Commissioner for the Armed Forces in 1961, serving until 1964 when he resigned over disputes with the Defense Ministry. He died November 10, 1970 at age 75. Admiral Hipper continued operations through 1942. She participated in commerce raiding operations in the Atlantic with mixed success. She was deployed to northern Norway to attack convoys to the Soviet Union. On December 31, 1942, she engaged British cruisers Sheffield and Jamaica and destroyers at the Battle of the Barents Sea. The engagement was inconclusive, but Hipper sustained damage, forcing her return to Germany. She spent most of 1943 and 44 in port due to mechanical problems and fuel shortages. British bombers attacked her at Kiel in April 1945, causing severe damage. She was scuttled by her crew, May 3, 1945. Her wreck was raised in 1948 and broken up for scrap between 1948 and 1952. The tactical lessons from Glowworm's final action were absorbed unevenly. The Royal Navy recognized that destroyers could damage heavy units if willing to accept destruction. This lesson informed later actions, including the Second Battle of Narvik, where British destroyers pressed close-range attacks against German destroyers anchored in confined waters. The Kriegsmarine recognized that allowing destroyers to close to ramming range was unacceptable. Fire control doctrine emphasized destroying light units at maximum effective range. The broader lesson, that individual courage cannot substitute for strategic preparation, was largely ignored. Operation Wilfred, the mine-laying Operation Glowworm was screening, was reactive and poorly coordinated. British intelligence had detected signs of German preparation for Norwegian invasion, but failed to act decisively. The mine-laying plan was too little, too late. Inadequately supported, Glowworm paid the price for that failure. Norwegian campaign failures stemmed from systematic problems: inadequate planning, poor intelligence, insufficient forces, divided command, political hesitation. Individual acts of valor like Roope's could not compensate for institutional deficiencies. The campaign demonstrated that Britain was unprepared for combined operations requiring coordination between naval, ground, and air forces. Those lessons would be relearned at greater cost in France, Greece, and Crete over the following year. The gap between expectation and reality defined the Norwegian campaign. British planners expected German forces could be interdicted before landing. Reality was German forces landed successfully across multiple locations simultaneously. British planners expected Norwegian forces would resist effectively until British reinforcements arrived. Reality was Norwegian defenses were overwhelmed in hours. British planners expected the Royal Navy's superiority would dominate the campaign. Reality was land-based. German aircraft and inadequate British air cover made naval operations extremely costly. HMS Glowworm expected to screen a mine-laying operation and return to base. Reality was detection by German invasion forces and destruction in an impossible engagement. Lieutenant Commander Roope expected to conduct routine patrol duties during a limited operation. Reality was the opening shots of the Norwegian campaign and a decision between meaningless death and death with purpose. The ramming of Admiral Hipper was not heroic in the sense of achieving significant military results. Hipper was repaired. The invasion succeeded. Norway fell. Strategic outcomes were unchanged. The ramming was heroic in the sense of choosing action over passivity, damage over surrender, purpose over preservation. Roope made the only choice that gave meaning to his crew's deaths. Warfare at sea in 1940 remained fundamentally about metal, explosives, and mathematics. Glowworm displaced 1,345 tons. Hipper displaced 14,000 tons. That ratio determined the engagement's outcome before the first shot. No amount of skill, courage, or determination could alter the fundamental physics. A destroyer cannot defeat a heavy cruiser in surface action. The specifications make that impossible, but a destroyer can hurt a heavy cruiser if willing to accept destruction. The ramming proved that 130 feet of armored plating torn away, torpedo mounting destroyed, hull breached, freshwater tanks punctured, 109 British sailors killed buying that result. The mathematics of the exchange were brutal, strategically meaningless, tactically interesting, morally unquantifiable. The survivors spent 5 years in German prisoner-of-war camps. They were well treated by standards of the time. German forces generally observed Geneva Convention provisions regarding prisoners from Western Allied nations. The survivors worked, waited, endured. They knew what had happened to Glowworm. They could not tell anyone. Information about the engagement remained classified on both sides. When they returned in 1945 and reported the engagement, British authorities initially questioned whether a ramming had actually occurred or whether survivors were embellishing. German records confirmed every detail. High's letter via the Red Cross confirmed not just the facts but the spirit of the action. The enemy himself testified to British courage. That testimony carried weight precisely because it came from an enemy. Hay gained nothing from recommending Roope for Britain's highest valor award. The gesture contradicted propaganda narratives on both sides. It acknowledged that courage existed independent of ideology or national interest. It recognized that sometimes, in specific circumstances, men on opposite sides could understand each other's actions even while attempting to kill each other. The fellowship between mariners, even enemy mariners, was real. High-ordered rescue operations despite tactical risk. German sailors pulled British sailors from freezing water. Officers congratulated defeated opponents on their fight. Standards of behavior existed that transcended the immediate conflict. Those standards were inconsistently applied and frequently violated, but they existed. The modern assessment must acknowledge complexity. Roope's decision to ram was tactically sound, given his circumstances, but strategically irrelevant. The Victoria Cross was deserved by standards of valor, but the need for such valor reflected British institutional failures. The German rescue effort was humane but did not diminish German responsibility for aggressive war. Individual actions within war exist, separate from war's larger context, yet cannot be evaluated independent of that context. HMS Glowworm lies in deep water west of Trondheim. Her wreck has not been located. She is designated a war grave. No salvage is permitted. 109 men remain entombed within or scattered around her hull. Died executing orders in a battle they could not win, defending interests they probably never fully understood. The memorials to Glowworm exist in archives, records, published histories. The Portsmouth Naval Memorial lists her dead. The Royal Naval and Royal Albert Yacht Club displays her plaque. Roope's Victoria Cross remains with his family. Lieutenant Ramsey's account of the engagement provides primary source detail. German records corroborate. The story can be reconstructed with reasonable accuracy. What cannot be reconstructed is the experience, the shriek of incoming shells, the impact of hits rattling the entire hull, the screaming of wounded men, the smell of cordite and burning oil and blood, the cold seawater pouring in through ruptured plating. The moment when every man aboard understood the ship was doomed and death was minutes away. The seconds between Roope's order to ram and the impact. What passed through his mind in those seconds? What the crew thought as they went over the side into freezing water, knowing they would probably die. The experience died with them. What remains is the fact. HMS Glowworm engaged Admiral Hipper on April 8, 1940. She fought until destroyed. She rammed before sinking. 109 men died. 40 survived. The enemy recommended their commander for the Victoria Cross. The Victoria Cross was awarded. That is the record. Clean, clinical, factual. It captures nothing of what it cost. War always costs more than the records indicate. The price is paid by individuals in moments of terror and pain and loss that no after-action report adequately describes. The accounting shows losses in ships and men. The reality was human beings dying in cold water far from home for objectives they did not choose in service of strategies they did not design. The obligation of those who study such events is clear. Remember the facts. Understand the context. Acknowledge the human cost. Learn the lessons. Honor those who paid the price without romanticizing their sacrifice or pretending it achieved more than it did. HMS Glowworm fought. She lost. Her crew died or survived by chance rather than design. Their courage was real. Their sacrifice was real. The strategic irrelevance was also real. All of these things are true simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope. Roope gave the only order that made sense in a situation where nothing made sense. Stand by to ram. The order was sound. The outcome was predetermined. The courage required was absolute. The Victoria Cross was earned. That is sufficient. No embellishment required. No dramatic narrative needed. The facts speak. 1 destroyer, 1 cruiser, 1 impossible decision, 109 dead, 40 prisoners, a Victoria Cross recommended by the enemy, a ramming that damaged but did not sink. A battle that changed nothing strategically and everything for those who fought it. April 8, 1940. Norwegian Sea. HMS Glowworm versus Admiral Hipper. The destroyer lost. Her crew gave everything. Their captain made the only choice that gave their deaths meaning. The enemy acknowledged their courage. The record remains. That is the story of HMS Glowworm. The ramming destroyer. The ship that refused to die quietly.